What's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was the car park of a pub in England, Southend. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked who I was waving at and I said just some lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years, I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I never was allowed to do, going to the window. I then realized I was in the house looking over that same parking lot, and remembering that interaction years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was in said car park waved at me and I waved back. I felt like I knew her, could not explain it and have never told anyone about it. It freaked me out. The sheer act of breaking the rule of entering that room tore through the fabric of space-time. Don't mess with Nan's rules. Weird but happy, about 5 years ago in November we lost our family dog to cancer. She was the dog my children grew up with, loved by all. At the next Christmas, at the end of the day of gifts, food and family, as I was picking up, I found a tiny pewter dog figurine sitting on the mantel. I asked everyone who had been at the house that day if they left it. No one had. Okay, weird, but took it as a good omen. When my eldest went back to college at the end of the Christmas break, he asked if he could take the little figurine to remember his dog. Of course, I said yes. A week or two later, picking up around the house, there was the figurine again. I called my son and said, "You forgot the dog figurine." He said, "No, I didn't. It's right in front of me on my desk." I had now found a second figurine. Again, no one claimed any knowledge of it. No idea how, but I still have the two of them tucked away on a shelf to this day. About a year ago, me and my cousin visited Los Angeles. We were driving around using Google Maps and after missing our third or fourth exit, we swear we both heard it sigh loudly before it rerouted us. We freaked out and made sure our driving was on point the rest of the ride. The rest of the trip there, if we missed any of our exits or turns, we always apologized to Google. So hopefully she would know we were just morons and not assholes. Removed a painting from the wall during a late evening cleaning, put it away and returned to the wall to see a never before seen painting on the same spot. Put a chill down my spine. I used to have a recurring dream as a teenager every night for months. I was sitting at a table on the patio of a restaurant. I was out there alone, waiting for my food. A homeless man comes up to the other side of the patio and asks for change. I am digging in my wallet for a couple dollars and then I hear tires screech and look up to see a crash in an intersection near the restaurant. I run out there to see if I can help, and as I run out into the road I get hit by a car and wake up at the impact. After a while the dream stopped and I put it out of my mind. Fast forward to me being 28 and sitting at an on the border, on the patio waiting for my food. A homeless guy comes walking past the restaurant but does not stop and ask for change. It makes me think about that dream though, and I start to feel uneasy. Shortly after, I hear the tires screech and I see a wreck happen in the intersection near the restaurant. I begin to run out there but stop at the sidewalk and look out towards incoming traffic, and there is an SUV not slowing down. She was on her phone and blew through the intersection completely unaware of what had just happened. Ran out and checked on the people. Everyone was fine. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I am standing in my sister's living room and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 a.m. and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There is a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there is a bright flash of light and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit and I found out they watched some rental movies and, of course, we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woo-woo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. I would not say that this was creepy, but it's definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I have ever experienced. So, back in 2016, I was injured at work, and for about 6 months my life consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was Ex-Heroes by Peter Clines. Now I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book I like to cast the characters in my head, coming up with how they look. One of the minor characters in this book was named Ilya, and because I know someone named Ilya, and because the book is set in Los Angeles where I live, the Ilya in the book became the Ilya that I knew in my imagination. But then, something strange started to happen. The Ilya in the book made specific references to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Ilya I know is a huge fan of. The Ilya in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Ilya that I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there was something so strange about the character in this book that I eventually reached out to the Ilya that I knew to ask about it. Turns out that Ilya knows the author, Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book with a story that takes place essentially on my street in Los Angeles and features someone I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind, and it's easily one of the most surreal experiences I have had. Not my story, but my grandpa's. So he served in the Navy and hadn't come home for 5 years. He finally got to go home, and on his way, he saw his old friend. Let's call him Wally. Wally was getting on his normal bus, and my grandpa shouted hi to him, but Wally didn't respond. But he didn't think much of it, seeing how Wally didn't have the best hearing. Wally got on his bus and looked my grandpa in the eye as the bus drove away. Later, after he got home and was talking to his dad, he asked him how Wally was doing and told his dad about how he saw him earlier. His dad was silent for a minute and asked him if he was sure he saw Wally. My grandpa said yes, and his dad replied, "Wally died 6 months ago." I died? I saw it. I lived it. Either it was another world with a version of me that died I saw, or I am going crazy, but I died. We had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished we had to go back to class. Well, my friend and I were not into that, so we wanted to across the street to Sonic. Across the school there is not heavy traffic, but if you don't pay attention you could get hit. Well, I remember walking with him and he dropped something, so I went across the street first. I just saw a red Tahoe heading right for me and I got hit. I remember everything. I remember gasping for air. I remember waking up and sleeping again. Then nothing. All of a sudden I was back in the stadium again, and the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth. My friend wanted to go get Sonic, but I was freaking out. Was asking him everything. I thought it had to be a dream, so I went with him just to see what would happen. He dropped his stuff again and I waited. To my horror, that same red Tahoe showed up. I told him that I am going back to school. I ain't dying again. I can still see the other version of me on that street, just messed up. Not even moving. I was on vacation on Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird but explained it away, thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me, until he looked at me and said, "Did everything go black for a second?" The gods were quick saving the simulation. Sun was just on the fritz, don't worry about it. One day when I was about 8 I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework etc., but he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said that he did not wanted to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun and he told me that he really had to go and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. Might get buried, but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. This summer I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, My girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol just for fun, it's not. She is a little ray of sunshine, and started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted "Oh my God," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we have traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there is more to this world than we think." As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time, and didn't really realize how glitchy in the matrix it was until people started commenting. In college, I took a hard news, soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Screaming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. About 2 years ago, I went to collect my husband from the ferry after work. My husband got into the car, and as I was driving very slowly out of the car park, we both noticed two people standing a few meters in front of our car. It looked as though they were strangers, older-looking professionals, both walking to their separate cars in different areas of the car park. The man was reaching into his side bag, and the lady was further ahead than the man, with her head turned to the right. I know the exact positions they were in because they were completely frozen on the spot. My husband and I sat there watching the frozen strangers, not saying anything to each other, and then all of a sudden it was like someone pressed play and the two strangers just continued on like nothing had happened. My husband and I promised to each other that we would never forget how weird the experience was. I can't remember exactly how long they stayed frozen like that, but it was long enough to freak us both out. 1985, my ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve oyster thing which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows towards the wall. I asked what's wrong, she said. What is that shiny black clam thing with the teeth at the end of the bed? Where is the dog? We had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me a chill. I have a jade Buddhist necklace I bought in China about 10 years ago. It disappears for months at a time only to reappear somewhere obvious like my desk, my dresser, in a drawer I use every day. I just say it goes on a trip and will come back eventually. Two things, each was witnessed by at least one other person and both were while driving. Once at a stop sign in a neighborhood, all of these little sparkles started swirling around in midair roughly 3-4 ft off the ground out of nowhere. The group of them were roughly 2 ft wide by 3-4 ft tall. It lasted 3-5 seconds and then they were gone, no one was around, and when I asked my passenger if he saw it, he breathed a sigh of relief and said yes. We spoke about it a little more, but there is no reasonable explanation. The second happened when myself and 3 friends were driving down an empty country road. Very straight stretch. A man on a bike appeared. Someone said to watch out for him, so not to hit him, and then he disappeared. Our minds were blown to say the least, just poof and he is gone. I was driving about 50 mph, and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view, just about to pull out. You died on the spot and your mind is living an alternate timeline. As someone who just watched all the Final Destination movies, I can confidently say that you are going to die. After my little brother was murdered the next morning, I was talking with a friend and he mentioned this other dude. I went to high school with younger brother had died in a car accident a couple weeks before. Later that day I pull out a slip of paper with this other dude's number and name on it from my pants. I vaguely remember running into him a year or so before this at a club where he gave me his number. I swear I had worn and washed these jeans at least a dozen times since I had run into this dude. I still makes no sense how the paper was there and I only found it then. I called the dude and we talked a bunch. It really helped me deal with the situation. My wife passed away a year ago today. Had some odd things happen, like a couple of old meaningful pictures show up that I swore were in storage. The strangest one was I vacuumed the carpet and as soon as I was done a diamond ring was on the ground right where I had just cleaned. It was like she was saying, "Hey, this one is real, don't lose it." My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. At it didn't. All a bit strange. She ignores it, but it does not stop, so she walks up to this guy and says, "I know this is crazy, but I have got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts." "I know that's crazy." Again, "Sorry." But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died and they made a pact before that if there was an afterlife he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase. So there could be no mistakes, which they decided was "I have hurt my leg." I remember driving my car to this intersection in this rural area and I am checking both sides because of terrible blind spots. In the corner of my eye my mother is sitting there and says something like, "It's all clear my way." I look back and she isn't there. My mother had been dead for a few years at this point. This was also in the middle of the day and I have never had it happen since. So this has always bothered me. I was 13 years old at the time and my dad was a coal miner. He worked third shift known as the hoot owl shift, which was midnight to noon. As such, he got home around 2 p.m. and slept till around 9, got up, had dinner with us and left for work. My dad was always pretty gruff and constantly yelled at us if my younger brother or I made too much noise and woke him up after getting home from somewhere, which as an adult now I completely understand. So one day I did something to wake him up, I forget what. Anyways, he calls me back to the bedroom and I am expecting to get a dressing down, but he just looked at me and said, "It's okay, come over here and give me a hug." What 13-year-old boy wants to hug their dad? I kinda squirmed a bit and he followed up with, "What if something happened to me?" And just laid there all grizzled and tired. I didn't hug him. That night there was an accident in the mine. He saved everyone on his crew, including the one person he went back in for. His was the only death, and I am convinced he knew it was gonna happen. I will never forget his eyes that day. If someone asked you for a hug, give it to them. I love you, dead. When the song The Final Countdown was released in the 80s, I already knew it. It was brand new, just released, but I knew the tune and the words and could sing the whole thing beginning to end. I believed for a while that it was a cover version, but it was not. I don't know if it's true, but I remember my father, who was a kid in the 80s, telling me that The Final Countdown was released and was not successful, but then released again a year later and that's when it exploded. That would explain that. Thanks for watching. Share your story in the comment.